Hi, this is Attorney Arash Jafary with AG Law Practice. Today we're going to talk about defamations and what it means to have a defamation case. This is going to be a multi-part video, so stay tuned after this video for next week's video where you're going to learn so much more about defamations. So defamation cases are very hard cases to prove for a good reason, because we're talking about a constitutional issue, freedom of speech, of course.
I don't know what to say, really.
And because of that, you have a high burden of proof to meet. What does that mean when we say a high burden of proof? Well, I'm sure you've heard in many movies and TV series when they come out and they say the state has to meet their case beyond a reasonable doubt. Well, that means that there can't be a shred of doubt in their case. Otherwise, their entire case is going to fall apart. Well, in civil cases, we don't have beyond a reasonable doubt. We have something called clear and convincing evidence. The plaintiff, you as the person who's bringing the lawsuit, who is claiming to be defamed, are saying basically that you have to prove your case by clear and convincing evidence. That means that there has to be a firm belief that what you're saying is true. That means if you want to put a percentage on it, let's say more than 85%. That what you're saying is true. This is going to be different for every case and depending on who you are. And we're going to get into that in just a minute and what we mean by who you are. So let's say you're a public official or a public figure. Well, who is a public figure and who's a public official? Let's talk about that. Public figure is someone who doesn't have a private life, basically. So those actors, like Angelina Jolie or Brad Pitt, they, movie stars, basically. Public officials. Who are public officials? Public officials are people who hold a position in the government, and people, the general public, they have an interest in their qualifications and their performance. That's it. So if you're a regular government employee working for the government, you're not yet that famous to reach to that level. We're not saying that you're not going to be, we're just saying that you're not there yet. So now that we know who public official and public figures are, let's talk about, so what does that mean? And what do we have to prove if we're a public official or a public figure and we want to prove that somebody has defamed us? You have to prove something called actual malice. Actual malice means that that person who's defaming me knew that what they were saying was wrong and they just didn't care about it. They just said it. That's it. So if that happens, then you have a case. You could have a case. There are two different scenarios, two different situations that we can have a defamatory statement. We're going to discuss defamatory statements now. So it has to be a defamatory word of a false statement. It has to be published to a third person. There is something called the publication rule, though. So let's say that in a magazine, something is published 5,000 times in 5,000 different issues. It's called a single publication rule for that reason. So that you don't have 5,000 different cases, defamatory cases, defamation cases. You have one. There are some exceptions, and we're not going to get into those exceptions now. So defamatory words published to a third party of a fact. It can't be of an opinion.
You gotta have an opinion.
Opinion on everything and say, oh, it's my opinion. If your opinion can be proven or disproven, then it becomes a fact. We have defamatory words published of a fact, not an opinion, of a fact concerning you. The person who's bringing the lawsuit, the person who's claiming defamation. So this brings us to the question, who can be defamed? Basically, any living person can be defamed. But just like any other rule, there are exceptions. Here is the exception, and this is the good part. If somebody has a will and they pass away, and their will has a defamatory statement in it, then their estate can be on the hook for that defamatory statement. Corporations, if they're prejudiced somehow and it deters people, that defamatory statement deters other people from doing business with them, then they have a defamation case. What about groups? If we're dealing with a very large group, do we still have a defamation case? Well, in those cases, it becomes a little bit tricky. The larger the group is, the lesser of a chance you have of having a defamation case. The smaller, the better. Okay, so defamatory statement published of a fact concerning the plaintiff, concerning you, carries a defamatory meaning. What does that mean? If it needs additional facts, then the jury can decide if it's a defamatory statement or not. And then plaintiff, you, suffer some kind of damages, and it's not privileged. So why do we require such high degree of proof for public officials and public figures? And here's why. Because we want to avoid self-censorship, number one. We want to encourage dialogue and criticism of those public officials. Number three, public figures have assumed the risk that false statements will be made. Four, public figures have access to the press, and public officials have the same thing, to rebut that statement, to say, no, that's not true. That statement is absolutely false. Five, they voluntarily put themselves in that position. Six, they are making decisions for our lives. So, we have to be able to discuss different issues. We have to be able to criticize these people. Otherwise, what good is it? So now we've learned who public officials are, public figures are, and in what cases they're going to have a defamation case. Stay tuned for the next episode, my friends, where we're going to discuss more things about defamation.